Welcome everyone to today's session organized by VODAN Africa. I believe this is the 13th installment of the Metadata for Machines workshop. My name is Charles Kahiro. I am the Creative Director at TravelWorks Africa, which is a leading provider for consulting services when it comes to OD and L&D. For today's session, which is actually a pretty cool one, we have a number of presenters. So from the GAFISCO office, we have Eric, we have Louise, and we have Case. Maybe they can say hi there in the chat box. And we also have Marek from the team at DSW, which is a data stewardship wizard. For today's session, we will be exploring the concept of VODAN in a box, which is actually no longer a concept. We'll be doing the installation tomorrow, I believe, but this will be the introductory webinar. For those who are wondering, VODAN in a box essentially is a collection of applications that will facilitate the localized acquisition and exposure for the case report forms on the FDP. Now that sounds like a mouthful, I'm sure, but that's why we have the team now who are going to go deeper into it, expose all the meat and potatoes of it, pretty much. So we are going to start with a brief introduction from Eric, and then after that, he'll hand over to Louise, and then afterwards, Marek, who's going to give us a short demo of the case report form data entry wizard, after Louise has taken us through the concept of VODAN in a box. So as always, during the presentation, let's try and keep our mics muted so we don't end up disrupting the presentation. So if you're yet to do so, just do so now. But we also want to hear from you, so be sure to put your questions in the chat box and I'll bring them up during the presentation. And also just to highlight, we'll have a section in the end for a Q&A. So if you can hold out, you can hold out till then. With that, I hand over to Eric.
Great, thank you, Charles, and good to be back here again for this particular metadata for machine workshop, because today we're going to get the first preview of what VODAN in a box can look like, does look like, and this is a moment, I think, where all the technical components for getting case report forms from patients into a machine interoperable format, and then have that capability running on a fair data point, this is where it all comes together. And so Luis and his technical team have been working on this over the, I don't know, the last many weeks here, and have now reached a point where this is something that can be installed and we can begin using it in the rest of the project. So let me just mention that we've been working with the fair data point up till now, and we've been trying to figure out how to best install these things, how to configure them to represent the VODAN use case, and how to represent well the hospitals or the clinical settings where the data is collected. And I think we've made pretty good progress on that up until last week. And now we're going to expand that capability with a few more components. And this should really help to round out then a complete workflow or complete package where we can actually begin to capture the appropriate data in the appropriate format and have it exposed in a way that's compliant with, or let's say adheres to FAIR principles. And so these additional components now compose what we call VODAN in a box. And the idea is that, kind of like a package that you would buy at a store where everything's kind of built in and ready to go. VODAN in a box comes with 3 applications: the FAIR data point, which we're familiar with, the electronic case report forms with a capability that has a data entry wizard built in. This is really nice because it makes data entry easy, but it also keeps all of the data local to that institution or organization that's running the wizard and or let's say it's running the VODAN in a box package. There's a third component, which is a query interface. And this involves some of the specialized technology that's running VODAN in a box. And these three components, and they're packaged in this VODAN in a box way, is going to be described by Luis in just a minute or two. And so I think we get a snapshot of the overall architecture and what this looks like. I've listed here some documentation and even the download for VODAN in a box. But this will also then, Luis will be followed with Marek, who is actually going to give us a demo then of this electronic case report form data entry wizard. So we'll actually get a snapshot. And I think this is useful for the data stewards who may be embedded in the hospitals and really working with the patient information. Just so everyone knows, yesterday we had a technical introduction to VODAN in a box from CASE. And I think that really laid the groundwork nicely for an installation webinar that we will attempt tomorrow. And we're going to keep it focused on the KIU instance for now. But of course, others are welcome to listen in. And, you know, depending on how quickly we can get the KIU system running, maybe there's time left over even for questions and answers or additional assistance on setting up additional instances of the FAIR data point and the VODAN in a box. And today we're going to get this introduction to the overall system and this demonstration. So that's all I wanted to mention today, just by way of introducing where we were and where we're going to. And with that, I'm going to release my screen and I think invite Luis to take over from here and give us an introduction to VODAN in a box.
Sure. Let me share my screen just a second. Yeah, you can all see, right?
Yep.
Okay. So just to recapitulate a little bit the goals, just the goal of my short presentation is just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So we have this idea of the VODAN in a box, where we have some goals of creating a solution that could be easy to deploy, that wouldn't need to be centralized, that every organization or entity or country or whatever type of entity would be interested on could deploy, install it whenever they want, to capture, store, and expose data and metadata related to virus outbreaks. So this was one of the main issues, because we wanted to support the possibility that the data and metadata stay on together with in the same location or administrative realm as their owners or creators. Whenever they decided to place that is where it should be. And then we thought about this package of having some tool that we could use to enter the data. So we have all this case to be reported. We need a kind of data entry tool to store this data, to capture this data in a digital form. We want also a tool to allow us to publish the metadata of the things that we are capturing, basically the data sets that we are talking about. And we want this data that we capture to be machine actionable, to be as fair as we can get them, so that we can start asking questions to the data. We can start integrating the data with something else. So we wanted to have a semantic data model attached to this, so the data that we are capturing using the WGO COVID-19 CRF model to be machine actionable, and then we created a semantic model for that. Look at these components in a more visual way. So we have these cases, and then we can talk about the cases in two different ways. We can talk about in a more abstract way that it's basically the metadata layer. So we have information about provenance, what are the license, the rights, and who captured that, under what conditions, what is that about, and so on. And this is the path that you see on top, that you have this information. You enter that information in your FedData point, and this FedData point stores the information in a triple store, which is application that stores data in a graph format that facilitates machine actionability. And then when you go more concrete about what the case constitute of, what are the parameters, when it happened, what were the symptoms, the exams and everything. We're talking about the actual data about the case. And here we're just following the WGO model. So we created two elements. So we have the WGO CRF semantic model that capture this this model defined by WGO in a computer actionable semantic way. And this model is used by the CRF wizard to make the data that you enter with the tool semantic as well in terms of linked data, and it's stored in a triple store. And then whenever you enter new information on your wizard, the wizard connects to the FedData point and updates the information that the metadata about your data set, saying that this data set has been updated at that time. So let's go just quickly over each one of these components. So we have the FedData point. You can see some screenshots on the left. It's our demonstration deployment that you can have the URLs. It's fdp.vodan.feddatapoint.org. And then here you have an example of the Kampala University installation of the FedData point already with some metadata there. So on the left, we try to make as explicit as possible that we are only going to have demonstration metadata pointing to demonstration data, nothing real, and then your deployments of the FedData point can carry the real things. Here with the FedData point, we have the documentation, how to install the reference implementation, how to deploy that. Some of you have gone through this documentation to deploy your own settings. We created some videos that you can watch to help on the use and installation. So this completes the part of this upper part here, the FedData point and the triple store deployed, available and documented. We created to facilitate the discovery of functionality that we call the FTP, the FedData point index, that registers all the available FedData points, the FedData points that are became online. So they connect to the service. They say, okay, I'm here. And then the service just tries to call back to see if that's really a FedData point. Or maybe you can reach that and it's not a FedData point, then it's the invalid elements here. And sometimes the deployed FedRAP points can communicate with the index, but the index cannot communicate back because, for instance, if it's in your local laptop, that's normally not going to be possible, or behind the firewall and so on. So it's just unreachable. But you can filter, you can click on the buttons on top of that to filter if you want to list only the active, the unreachable, invalids, and so on. We have the semantic data model. We published that. We have on GitHub. Also, whenever we updated the GitHub, we also updated in BioPortal. It's a repository for ontologies. And we have since we published this in the first version in April, we have over 1,400 visits that you can see on this page on a BioPortal. This checks the semantic data model. And then we have the wizard that it's a version adapted from the data stewardship wizard developed by the people from the Technical University of Prague together with the Dutch Tech Center for Life Sciences. And it's a web-based form based on the WHO COVID-19 CRF. And it embeds the semantic data model, as I said, to allow the tool to export the data in RDF based on that model. And then we can download the file, the RDF file of your case data, or you can upload this, submit this directly to the triple store that's being deployed together. And then, of course, the triple store supports distributed querying. So we can ask questions, and we're going to see a little bit of this later. We can ask questions to this data and in a distributed way. We don't need to copy them to our location. We just send the queries, get the answers, and see the results. This is how you want to see more detail with Marek, but this is how you have a list of cases here on the left. You have you are entering a new case, or you are filling a new form that you to report a new case. And then you can, once you do that, you can either download the RDF file, or you can submit your data to the triple store. And then after you do that, then the data can be queried. This is the documentation of the VODAN in a box, all these elements, how you set up this in your local machine for testing and demonstration, but then when you want other people to access, how you do this in a production environment. And you have all this this information here on instruction on how to do that, which completes the box. So then we can have the whole. Now we have the whole VODAN in a box done, ready to be used and tested. So basically, the basic workflows. You have a preparations phase when you just install these applications. Then you have to, probably a data steward should go in the FedRAP point and create the metadata of the data set, the catalog and the data set and the distribution that represents the data set of the case reports that you are going to enter in the wizard. Then you go to the wizard configuration and you inform the wizard the identity, the identifier of the distribution metadata that you just created, because then every time you export the data from the wizard to the triple store, the wizard automatically updates your metadata saying that the data has been updated at that time. This can be done only once by the data steward and the system administrator, or whoever has access to the wizard configuration. And then the daily operation, normally the normal workflow is that some user that's responsible for entering the data, maybe it's a doctor or a nurse or some healthcare professional at the hospital, or someone else that gets the paper report forms, and then we'll transcribe them to the computer. we'll enter the report information, fill in the CRF wizards form, and all these steps can be done by the same user. But if you decided to have different tasks for different roles, then once the data are there, then someone like the data steward can generate a report. Marek is going to explain you how to do these steps. And then once the report is there, then you can submit the data to the Drupal store. So we have, also Marek is going to show you, we can have some queries, of course, or we can have any query that can be supported by the data. So we entered some mocked up data in the Drupal store in our demonstration environment, and then we created a few queries. One of them is this one that I'm going to show you. That I'm asking, just show me the names of the healthcare facilities that have had male patients that were admitted with the fever. I'm not checking if the patient kept having fever or got better or worse during the term in the hospital, just the ones that are male and then they were admitted presenting fever. And then this is, it's not very interesting now, but that's just when you have access to the slides that we are going to make available. But also we are putting all these queries on GitHub, so you have the queries as well if you want to play around. And this is the query, entering the query interface of the Drupal store. And then here it presents, in this case, we just have a few case reports, 7 or 8, I guess. And then said that, okay, matching our criteria of being male and presenting fever, when admitted, we have these 2 hospitals, 3 patients in 2 hospitals that match the criteria of these questions. Okay, I think, is there any pressing question, or should we move straight to Marek?
Well, maybe just one question from me, Luis. You're mentioning something called the Sparkle query here.
Yeah.
Are there online resources where people can find out more about triple stores and Sparkle queries?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. This is a, I don't know, 15-year-old technology that's been around for quite some time. So there is W3C with a series of tutorials for RDF, for Sparkle, and so on, and the documentation of the Drupal store vendors as well are very abundant. So it's really definitely not a difficulty on getting further information about it.
Okay, great.
So I'll stop sharing my screen so Marek can take over.
Okay, hello everyone. So I will share my screen.
Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question, just post it in the chat box and then we can ask it in plenary.
So hello everyone. And I will show you the WADAN in the box in our live deployment. And I will start with the fair data point that already you know quite well. So as Luis explained, we have here prepared a catalog with some data sets and a distribution to represent our CRF data. And you already should know that the metadata in fair data point are machine actionable. That means that you can, for example, here download RDF file or take a look at it. And or you can access it using its URL and API. For example, I have some simple tool to do that. And the important thing that Luis mentioned, that Wizard will update the metadata, especially this modified metadata about the CRF data. So we will take a look at it after we do some changes. So that's for the fair data point part. And now I'm going to show you finally the wizard. And I'm logged in as a regular user, so someone would enter the data. And on the first page of the menu, I can see CRF templates, and here is just one that represents the WHO COVID-19 CRF that you already also know. For those who may not, it's just this form converted to eCRF, so it's electronic. On the second page, we have a list of CRFs that are already there. We can, of course, filter them or sort them. And I can now create a new one, new CRF. I will have to fill in some identifier. So, for example, something like this. And I will select the template. There is just one. And now I have the CRF form in electronic way. So I have here the chapters as are in the PDF file distributed by WHO. And for example, here in the introduction, I can fill in some participant ID when I have site code assigned. So I can fill in something here. And I can go through the questions. For example, in module 1, I can fill in some facility name. Select some country. I'm from Czech Republic, so I will pick Czech Republic and some date. I have here a note about the format, so I will fill it in the required format, and I can go on, for example, with some demographics. So it's basically the same for just in electronic, more convenient way. For now, I think it's enough. For example, what I can do more is here add some to-do note, for example, about the age, because I'm, for example, about to check it out later on. And as it is now, I can save this CRF. And now I see here the option to create a report. Report is basically a snapshot that is machine actionable. And I will do that. The name is pre-filled with the identifier of the CRF, so I don't have to change it. And it will use the template connected to the semantic model that Luis described. And it will result in file in turtle RDF format. So I will create this report. And when it is created, I can do two things. First, I can download it as a file. So I can download it here in my prepared folder. And I can show you that now I can edit it or work with it as with any RDF file with tools that I'm used to. And I can see here my answers that I just filled in. Here is the country using Wikidata, for example. And here is the address or URL of the CRF in the wizard. The second thing that I can do from the wizard with report is submission. I can submit this report to both repository and update the related metadata in a fair data point. So I will now submit it, and it tells me that it was submitted. And now I can take a look again to the fair data point and to this page, and we see that previously, and this was the timestamp when was the last change of the distribution, but now when I refresh the page, it's more recent. Of course, it uses UTC time. So it's like 2 hours from my time zone, maybe different for you. So that's the first thing. It updates the metadata, but it also stores the data in a triple store. And in WODAN in the box, we have Allegro graph for storing those data. And we have here CRF repository for that. And in it stores each CRF as a main graph. So you can easily see the graphs. And the UID here of the graph, which is unique identifier, which does not change over time, is the same as was in the file or in the URL of the wizard that you can see in browser. So here it starts with 116, and it is this one. So when I take a look, it's the same participant ID that I just filled in, and I can browse something. For example, here I have the facility, or I can check, for example, here the country, and I get the Wikidata entry. So that's basically how I get the data into the triple store. Of course, what Wizard can do is update the CRF. Can go back to the Wizard, go back to CRFs, open again the same CRF. And for example, I left out some to do here. So I will go back and I can, for example, adjust it because I found out that the previous value was wrong. And I can also fill in something more, or I can even add some daily form for today. Let's say add some more information. For example, like this. I can again save it with the changes. Again, create a report. And now the new report, I can again submit. Submit it. I can again check the metadata, again update it. And here in the graph, I can check that there are now more items. And for example, here I can find out that I filled something in module 2, and in daily vital signs, I filled this temperature. So the changes are like edit, and what I changed is updated in the triple store. Of course, the old data, for example, the age of 27 is no longer there, it's updated with 28. This is something very common because, as you could see, in the CRF there is the module 2, which is follow-up, or it's also called daily form, which should be filled like on daily basis for each patient. So someone will then tomorrow should add here another form for that day. And again, fill something, for example, some laboratory results. I'm not from healthcare, so I'm not sure about the values. So I'm not sure if 5 is low or too much. So I will just fill something, can again save it, create report, submit, and the data will be updated. So that's the basic workflow with the wizard and triple store and per data point in the WODAN in the box. Now, what might be interesting for you is the last part that Luis mentioned, and those are the queries. You could see that I can here browse the name graphs, but I can do also some queries. I could write Spark a query here and just execute it. And I could do that because in our deployment, we have read-only access for anonymous users, but I can also like log in to see more options. And you can see that I have now much more options with the triple star, including some saved queries, which I have prepared. And I have two here. This one is very simple. It just lists the UIDs and participant IDs. So when I execute it, I can here see the UID from the wizard with participant ID. And the second one is related to what Luis mentioned, that it's about females that were admissioned with fever. And when I execute it, I will get some So that's basically how can you use it directly in the VODAN in box, because Allegro Graph is part of it, but it also serves as standard SparkQL endpoint, which allows you to query the data from like any application script or just as external data source. What can I show you is that I can query those data using Wiki-based query service that is deployed on totally different server. And it also does the thing that Luis described related to distributed queries. Here, what we do is to count COVID positive patients and relate them to countries using coordinates for countries so we can like visualize it. And it does not use just single VODAN in the box deployment, but two, the one that I just showed you, and also our second one that we have for tests. So it queries data from both of them at once. And here you can see that it selects country and COVID positive patients. So when I run this service, run this query, I can then see the result in the bottom. And because of the coordinates, I can visualize the results on a map. So in our case, we have here one case in Spain, one in France, one in Czech Republic, and two in Netherlands. Of course, if I want, I can switch to table view to see the results as well. So this shows that even distributed queries work with VODAN in a box. The overall solution is very flexible and as it is, but it allows you even like configure parts of it, and you could even use some other triple store if you need to. And I guess that's pretty much it from the demo, and we are looking forward to answer your questions and have some discussion about that. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Marek, for that. I can see in the chat box there's a fire brewing. There have been a lot of questions in the chat box, but I'm going to ask them again in plenary, and then the team can answer them for the benefit of everyone, more or less. So we had one, the first question was from Professor Miriam, who was asking Luis whether the data in the triple store, let me find it specifically. Yes. So she was asking whether the data in the triple store is located within the location of residence to where the data is produced.
It will be, the triple store will be located on wherever the person installed desires. So if the hospital install that in a hospital server, that's where the triple store will be. But you can point, you have so many alternatives. You can install the DSW and deploy TripleStore in the cloud and connect it both. So you can do whatever your environment requires.
So I'll put my own follow-up to that one. So essentially, from the way I've seen your diagram there, the two databases are separate. So whatever the FDP is storing and whatever the data that's being collected by the wizard itself. So does that mean, let's say, if I am doing a local deployment where I have done both of them on one machine, is it possible for me to move, let's say if I want now to do a production deployment of the FDP, do I have to move everything, which means I have to re-enter the data, or can I just link the current triple store that's on this machine that's for the wizard to, let's say, a cloud version of the FDP? Yeah.
Well, you can, it's going to be hard for you to connect the triple store that you enter in your local machine with the one in production, because, for instance, if your local machine is a laptop, you're going to move it around. And then at some point, it will be offline and so on. So this connection will be lost. So the ideal situation in this case, where you started working in your local machine and then finally move to a production, you can export the data on your triple store, your local triple store, and insert that data in your production triple store. So basically copying, moving the data from your machine to the triple store, and then keep filling more cases in the production environment. Yeah, because more or less the question is about migration, and it's great that you've answered it concisely, because if everybody is trying to run these things more or less from a local deployment and you have put in some data to test, when you do decide to move it to a server or a cloud server or on-premise, how exactly would that work? Because one of the concern would be to lose the data or have to do all the data entry again. So it's great to know that you can just export your data. You hinted something in your question about we have now two triple stores, one for the Federal Point, another one for the Wizard. This is just to make things flexible for installation, because you can install a Federal Point with its triple store, I don't know, on the moon, and then this wizard and the attached triple store to the wizard in your location, because the data is more sensitive than the metadata. But technically, you can use one triple store for both. The thing that we made it separate, it's also to make it clear that these are things that should be, even if they're in the same triple store, they should be in a, let's say, in separate databases in the same triple store, because you don't want to start querying your data and getting metadata mixed up in your results. Inside it, and also authorization, security, and things like that. Yes. All right, on to the next question. So Jamil was asking whether the CRF, as it has been built, allows for data entry only for individual cases, or it can operate for bulk. Meaning, if you already have the data somewhere, is it possible to upload all your cases all at once, or do you have to go every individual case one at a time? Yeah, no, the tool was intended to allow for people to type in the cases individually, and then upload to the triple store. If you already have CSV files or any data already available in a computer readable way or structured way, it will be easier in this sense to create a kind of simple ETL. Where you apply the semantic data model to your existing data and upload them already in terms of RDF directly to the triple store. All right. On to the next
question. Let me see. Professor Miriam was asking, I guess this is directed to Marek. Can you see the queries, how many out of the entire available data have responded to the query? I'm not quite sure what Professor was asking. Maybe you can just unmute your mic, Professor, and ask it directly.
Thank you, Charles. I meant, like, for instance, the example of the how many females with a fever entered. Can you then see how, out of how many data visited these 3 cases were emerged? So in a sense, could you do statistics on it?
Marek?
Yeah. I think it's possible because SparkQL allows that. You could just count all of them and then compare the number of matching and not matching. It's possible in SparkQL.
Right.
All right, Jamil followed up with a question on the same in terms of what are the possible queries, or is there a finite number of questions or more or less queries that you can ask or interrogate of the data and get back, or is there a limit to it?
No. So the question space is a kind of open. So the only restriction here is not a technological restriction, of course. The only restriction that we have is does the data support the question that I'm asking? So we can go for very elaborate questions. For instance, okay, give me the number of cases where people enter the hospital without fever, without coughing, without severe symptoms, with a nice blood pressure, but then during their time in the hospital, they got worse and worse and so on. So give me the patients that have hemoglobin level X in the first days, and after taking that medicine, lower the blood pressure or the heart rate or something like this. And we can even, because we are using a technology that supports and promotes data interoperability and facilitates data interoperability, we can start combining with different things. For instance, we can we have some examples that we can get the data from places, query in the data that we have, and combining some information with other data sets, for instance, Wikidata or Uniprot or things like that, dynamically, and start enriching our results. So I would say that the limitation is everybody's imagination. Of course, it needs to be realistic in terms of does the data support these questions or not.
All right. So essentially, just a follow-up, if you had CRF for, let's say, pre-existing conditions, or if a hospital is instituting its own CRF just for regular general case report files, is it possible to correlate or to query the 2 databases with the same query?
Sure.
So for COVID data and the other one.
Yeah, for instance, you can even correlate the data from different places. Imagine that we have, for instance, imagine that the Uganda, Nigeria, Tunisia, all the involved countries, they made available the Spark endpoint so people can ask questions to the data.
Yep.
Then I can make a query, one single query that is triggered on all these different triple stores at the same time, and can even correlate data there with other data sources.
Oh.
So this is something that, for instance, the relational database does not support. It is federated data on multiple sources, combining on the fly.
Yeah. All right. As I'm checking the chat box, also we have some additional questions coming in. So we have Professor Miriam also asking whether we can add entries to the Ecrf entries. So by that, she's highlighting any relevant items, let's say from the DHS for recording patient data. And Professor, feel free to interrupt in case my question has not been articulated clearly.
No, I think that you mean to add more questions to the form, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the thing. From the DSW, from the CRF wizard point of view, this is what it's made for. So you can go to the interface, you can edit the template, because we use a template of the CRF, Wgo CRF.
Yeah.
And then whoever has access to the wizard can have access to editing the template. And then you can add your questions and with the explanations and so on. The issue here is that because we are not only storing this data in a simple structure way, but we are also enriching it with semantics, we have the semantic data model that has been designed to fit exactly the Wgo CRF. So it does not contain other questions, only contain the concepts related to the questions in the Wgo CRF. Yep. So if you want to do that, you have to also extend the semantic model, and there is a mapping embedded in the wizard that relates the structure of the questionnaire that you have to the concepts in this in the semantic model. So we have to extend that as well.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you, Luis. That's very clear.
Professor, maybe you'd like to follow up with your question on the ETL.
Yes, the question there is that, so we understand that if it would be compliant with DHS, then we would have to extend the semantic model. Yeah. But now the question is that if a hospital digitalizes the data, and so in bulk, in fact, digitalizes them for DHS, but then in bulk wants to entry them in the DSW wizard, then that would be interfaced through ETL. I think that is what I've understood.
Yeah. That of course you can retype it, but that's a lot of extra manual work.
Yes.
So I would say that an ETL is a good solution for that. Or to do, as I said, extend the model, extend the stuff, and then you can migrate the ones that you have from the DHS, and then from that point on, the CRF wizard will be already extended, so we can start from that point on entering directly there.
Yeah, so we have actually different solutions there, different options that can be considered from here on, which is good. That's really good.
Yeah, for instance, just an example, the VODAN chapter in Brazil, they went to that path because of some cultural aspects and resource aspects. They found out that the easiest way for people to enter the data will be using mobile applications. So they created a mobile application. They even cater for the gloves usage and so on, that people can enter the data directly in the system. The system stores the data in a relational database, and they create an ETL based on our semantic model to transform the relational data into RDF to feed the Drupal store. That was their choice.
Okay, thanks, Luis. That helps.
Abdullah is asking a related question. So around steel batch entries. So how exactly would you execute it? And I believe your answer was addressing it more or less. So around using CSV files, and is the only way to enter the data, only the electronic case report form.
Yeah, for now will be to have the ETL. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess anyone who's using either an open data kit or that kind of stuff for mobile or electronic data capture will have to go through an ETL
Yes. Yeah.
to push the data. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know whether there are any more questions. If you do, you can unmute your mic now, more or less, and ask directly. But you can also type in the chat box, and I will forward it for you. There was a question also on documentation. Exactly where can people find the documentation on all of this? Essentially,
Okay. Yeah. The documentation is docs. I'm putting the link here, docs.vodan.fairdatapoint.org.
Great. The link to the documentation is in the chat box. It is docs.vodan.fairdatapoint.org.
But I also, the link is on my presentation, and I already sent the slides to Ivy.
Yeah, and Ivy will share all the slide deck with everyone after this, and also the webinar is being recorded. So in case you need to rewatch it or revisit something, it will be available for you guys. Also, Case has shared the clickable version. So thank you, Case. You can go directly to it and you can bookmark it on your browsers so you can be able to revisit it when you do need it. Just to highlight, we will have a webinar on the actual installation of the VODAN in a box tomorrow. So just check your emails. I believe the reminders will be going out for the same. So in case you want to see the deep dive on this one, just be sure to join us tomorrow. I don't know whether there are any more questions.
Just one comment.
Yes.
That when we started this, I think that in March or April, think about this, we only thought about creating the metadata part and the semantic model. So to make the data about COVID cases semantical, so we can have more sophisticated queries. Because at that point we assumed that, okay, it seemed obvious, it seemed clear to us that data will be available somehow if there is an existing system or something like that. But you know, this came from a engineering perspective without having a lot of experience in the healthcare world. And then what we saw immediately everywhere, it's not only with VODAN Africa, but VODAN Africa, VODAN Brazil, here in the Netherlands, is that that assumption was a stretch. It's not always the case that the facilities will have already or easy tools to enter the data. So then after we started working, we said, okay, maybe we can work in a demonstration of a tool that can provide this data entry facility just to push forward, because then we could have a complete package from the data entry to querying to demonstrate, and then people get more interested, and then other possibilities will emerge. And even for that tool, we already see a lot of path for progression to improve features, to allow this importing of existing CSV data or already structured data so we can convert on the fly. But this needs to be done. The goal for this stage was just to demonstrate the feasibility of the approach, and then once everybody agrees that, oh yeah, we agree that's feasible, then we could move to improve these things.
Yes, I believe the demo itself has gone a long way to showing that feasibility, especially when we make considerations for Most hospitals, they may not even have electronic data capture systems, or at least where the data itself is in proper format, but showing us that, you know, the ECRFs can actually be deployed in a way that the clinics and the hospitals can actually use them to collect the same data and not have to do repeat processes. I think that's awesome. Bart had raised his hand at some point, I believe.
Yes, Charles, I would just like to say that I was very impressed by all the presentations. And I would really like to take the opportunity to thank Kees, Marek, the team of Louise, and of course Eric also, because this is a fantastic result. So thanks very much, guys. This was really good.
Yes, I agree. The guys did a great job. Any more questions and comments before we close? Going once.
Just a request. Now start using.
Yes, absolutely. I guess once we go through the process tomorrow, where everyone, the installation has been highlighted, hopefully it can be as detailed as possible, so to make deployment easier for everyone. Then after that, at least we can get some clinics or some hospitals using it, so we can see how things are panning out.
I'll be very happy when I see thousands of cases
yes.
there. That would be great.
All right, going once, going twice. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. We really do appreciate that you took the time to be here. We'd like to thank our presenters once again for availing themselves to do the presentation and to give us all this great information. Just before we sign off, just to remind you guys, the webinar has been recorded and will be available on the VODAN Africa website, hopefully by the end of the week. So in case you missed part of it or you want to revisit it and review the topic once more, just be sure to check that one out. Also, join us tomorrow for the installation webinar. The details will be going via the various VODAN Africa comms channels. So stay tuned for that, as well as the 14th installment for the M4M next week. Details on the same will be shared also on the various VODAN Africa communication channels. By that, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time, which is hopefully tomorrow.
Good. Thanks, Charles. See you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Oh, bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.